The text buzzed in, simple, but it felt like a slap. We're doing a younger, sleeker wedding. You understand. It was 9:42 a.m., just another morning with cold tea and buttered toast when I picked up my phone. I thought it might be a reminder for groceries, or maybe one of Lily's philosophical texts from her high school days. Instead, it was Rachel, and in 6 words, everything changed. We're doing a younger, sleeker wedding. You understand. No greeting, no context, just that. A sharp, sterile message that seemed to carve a space between us I didn't know existed. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. The text buzzed in, simple, but it felt like a slap. We're doing a younger, sleeker wedding. You understand. The phone buzzed at 9:42 a.m., a single sharp vibration on the breakfast table beside my cooling tea. I was buttering a slice of toast, already halfway through the crossword puzzle when I picked it up, expecting a grocery reminder or maybe Lily with one of her philosophical 11th grade questions. Instead, it was from Rachel. We're doing a younger, sleeker wedding. You understand. No greeting, no, "Hi, Mom," just that. I stared at the screen, blinking slowly. Sleeker, younger, understand. The toast slipped from my hand and landed butter side down on the open newspaper. My thumb hovered above the phone. I reread the message, searching for punctuation, warmth, context. There was none. Just those 6 words, brittle as frost. Understand what exactly? That I wasn't invited? That I didn't fit into the palette of eucalyptus greens and minimalist white orchids? That somehow my age, my body, my existence no longer complemented the aesthetic of her new life? I felt something fold inside me, quiet, but final. Rachel had always been sharp, efficient, the kind of girl who corrected her teacher's grammar by 3rd grade and rolled her eyes when I wore prints she deemed aggressively vintage. But I'd thought, hoped our years meant something more than that. I lifted the tea to my lips, but the sip was bitter now, stale. A younger, sleeker wedding. I had walked through fire to raise her, canceled vacations, cooked through flu seasons, sat on metal bleachers in the cold while she ran track. I'd held her hand through every breakup and gripped the wheel with white knuckles when she learned to drive. I'd paid for therapy she didn't know I skipped meals to afford. But none of that was sleek. None of that fit into a Pinterest board with pastel menus and gold-trim place cards. I set the mug down too hard, and it chipped at the rim. I stared at the hairline crack, then at the slice of toast on the crossword. 5 across, that which remains after the fire. Ashes. I stood, pacing the kitchen. The radiator hummed softly. Outside, a car door slammed and a dog barked. Inside, everything shifted. Rachel had moved on, made space for a husband, a future, a life where I wasn't a guest of honor, but a ghost in the wings, expected to understand, to step aside. Well, maybe it was time I did. I walked to the hallway and stood before the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch. Crow's feet, yes, silver at the temples. But I looked real and tired of shrinking to fit. I opened the closet door and stared at the boxes stacked there. Old journals. Shoes I hadn't worn since the last dinner party Rachel hosted, where she seated me beside the door for easier access. I walked past them all and grabbed my phone. Scrolled to Tom, landlord. I hesitated. The safe version of me would leave it alone. Accept her new life. Stay here. Smile politely through another distant wedding with a seat near the buffet and a thank you card months later. But I'd lived my whole life bending, and I was starting to feel the cost. I hit call. The dial tone rang out like a challenge. As the phone rang, I closed the closet door behind me. I didn't know what I was walking toward, but I knew I wasn't staying here anymore, waiting to be erased. The phone rings twice before the landlord picks up. My decision is final. It's time to take control of this situation. It rang twice, maybe 3 times. Then his voice came through, crackly and half asleep, as though I'd stirred something more than just a man from a nap. Tom here. I swallowed. My throat was dry. "Hi, Tom. It's Grace. From Cottage 3 on Willow." A pause, then a shift in tone. "Grace. Hey there. Everything okay?" I looked around my living room, sunlight catching on the dust across the mantel, an old family portrait staring back with smiles we hadn't worn in years. "Not really," I said. "I think I need to move out." Another pause. Not shocked, not judgmental, just quiet. "Okay," he finally said. "Do you need to break the lease?" "Yes." I gripped the edge of the counter. "I know it's sudden, but I can't stay here anymore." He sighed, but it was the tired kind of sigh, not the angry kind. "Well, it's your name on the lease. You've been here 5 years, never missed a payment. I can work something out." Tears pooled unexpectedly. I didn't let them fall. "Are you okay, Grace?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure yet, but I know I need a change. I can't keep waiting for my life to make space for me." The words came out before I could polish them, but they rang true in my chest. Tom cleared his throat. "Look, I've got a tenant lined up for July. Place always moves quick in the summer. If you're out by end of next month, I won't charge a penalty." I closed my eyes, let the relief sweep in like a tide. "Thank you," I whispered. "Really?" "No problem," he said gently. "If you need help with anything, recommendations, boxes, whatever, I've got a Kuze, man who runs a moving company. Just say the word." I thanked him again and ended the call. Then silence. Not the kind that presses, not like the one that followed Rachel's text. This silence felt like open sky, wide, blue, untethered, terrifying, and thrilling. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, staring down at the chipped mug beside the crossword, the buttered toast congealing on the page. It felt like the house had shifted under my feet, or maybe I had. I ran my hand along the wall of the hallway as I walked, touching photographs I hadn't really looked at in years. Rachel at age 5, covered in cake. Rachel at 12, holding her science fair trophy. Rachel at 20, beaming at her graduation, while I stood behind her, smiling, supportive, always a step out of frame. I stepped into the bedroom and opened the closet. The same shoes, the same carefully folded linens, the same sense that none of this belonged to a woman who had lived for herself. I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled. What now? No one answered. But inside, a flicker rose, something like possibility. What if I left the wedding behind entirely? What if I didn't just move apartments, but moved cities, countries? What if I traveled, painted again, wrote that book I shelved when Rachel was a toddler? What if I stopped waiting for someone else to decide I mattered? My heart picked up, nervous and exhilarated. I wasn't young, but I wasn't done. The decision was made. I stood up and pulled a suitcase from under the bed. I didn't know where I was going, but I was going. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't waiting for permission. As I zipped the case open and started folding the first sweater, I felt it, the quiet thrill of uncertainty. The next step was mine to choose. I started packing, not knowing what I was leaving behind, but feeling sure of what I was moving toward. I stood in the center of the living room, a cardboard box at my feet, walls lined with memories, family portraits, framed ribbons, Rachel's baby shoes in soft pink. Each lifeless object stared back, reminding me of the years I'd devoted to someone else's story. I picked up a small canvas on the mantel, my first acrylic painting, bold blue strokes I'd done between PTA meetings. I traced the edges with a fingertip, heart tightening. I set it in the box labeled Art Dreams. Box by box, I sifted through my life. Recipes clipped from magazines, travel maps I never used, journals filled with half-written poems and empty margins. Each item felt like a tether to a version of myself I'd shelved long ago. I paused at a stack of photographs on the coffee table. Rachel's track meet, birthday parties, graduation day. The smiles were real, but I realized they were all for her. Where was I? When had I stopped living for me? The afternoon sun slanted through sheer curtains as I taped the Art Dreams box shut. It felt lighter than it should have, less like loss, more like release. My phone vibrated. I glanced at it. A text from Rachel. "Mom, can you come help pick centerpieces? We need you." My chest twisted. A polite version of her last message. Warm enough to sound like inclusion, cold enough to remind me of her tone. I silenced the phone. Another text from Tom. "Let me know when you want those moving boxes." I exhaled. I was closing doors and opening others. After pausing for a drink, I moved to the bedroom, the quietest room in the house. I pulled a drawer open and found my passport, half empty, the last stamp dated 2009. I hadn't traveled beyond this home since Rachel left for college. I gently slid it into a folder marked Future. I tucked in an old acceptance letter from a writing seminar I never went to. The words creative writing glowed faint in my mind. I stared. And at the stacks of unopened mail, bank statements, utility bills, newsletters from local art fairs. It had taken courage to read those postcards in years past. Now they felt like invitations. I searched online, apartments in the next town, townhomes near the coast, shared studios in artsy neighborhoods. I imagined walking through doorways that would be mine alone. I bookmarked 3 listings, a sunlit loft with a balcony, a cottage steps from the harbor, a studio above a bookstore. I felt fluttery, alive. Evening light stretched shadows on the walls. I returned to the living room, touched the final box labeled Me. At the top was my favorite typewriter, dusty, silent, but waiting. I pressed a key. Clack. The sound echoed. Start. Some sadness curled beneath my ribs. This place had held laughter, milestones, love, Max's graduation party, Rachel's first heartbreak, the night she kissed her fiancé here. But it had also held ghost spaces, where my own voice dissolved in the background. I folded the Me box lid and stood, breathing in the quiet hum of my own making. I looked at the unopened greeting card from Rachel that sat on the table. Can't wait to share this day with you. I'd lived the final draft of that sentiment. I didn't need the card. I needed to live ahead. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to a real estate agent I'd saved earlier, her listing of that harbor cottage. My thumb hovered over call. My heart drummed, reminding me that this sounded like more than noise. It sounded like possibility. I tapped the number and set the phone to my ear. As the line rang once, twice, I looked around the half-packed room, home and history behind me, future and freedom ahead. The countdown had begun. I was ready to step out of the shadows and into my own light. It wasn't just about leaving a house, it was about leaving a life. The morning air felt sharper than usual as I pulled open the curtains. Light streamed across half-packed boxes like a spotlight on a stage I never thought I'd stand on. I reached for my coffee, the mug warm in my hand, and let the silence of the house settle around me. There was no rush, just resolve. I moved through the living room, taping up a box labeled Me. Inside it were small things with big meaning, my old writing notebooks, a faded sketchbook, a scarf from the trip I never took. Each item was a breadcrumb back to myself. On the floor sat a pile of Rachel's childhood photos I hadn't boxed yet. I stared at one, her at 11, in a yellow dress, hugging a puppy. My fingers brushed the image gently, but there was no ache, just understanding. I had loved her with everything I had, but I'd forgotten to leave space for myself. The phone buzzed again, a new message from Rachel. "We need a final head count for the rehearsal dinner. Can you confirm your dress color?" A wave of tension crept into my shoulders. The tone was softer, but the pattern was the same. Assume I'm there. Expect I'll comply. I locked the phone and left it on the table. I had a different plan today. I opened my laptop and refreshed the real estate page. The cozy apartment above the gallery was still available. Arched windows, a tiny balcony, steps from the art walk every second Saturday. I clicked Schedule Viewing. Then came a knock. Miriam stood there with a bag of croissants and a look that saw through me instantly. "You're glowing," she said as I stepped aside. We sat by the window, sharing the flaky pastries in companionable quiet. "Tell me everything," she said finally. I did. The boxes, the text, the apartment, my plans, my fear. She listened without interruption. When I was done, she smiled. You don't need to apologize for taking up space, Grace. You've earned the right to live your life on your terms. Tears threatened. I blinked them back. Don't go back, she added gently. Not to the house, not to the version of you that only ever gave. I nodded. Her words stayed with me long after she left. Later that evening, I tackled the hall closet. Tucked behind old scarves was a manila envelope. I pulled it free and opened it without thinking. It was a letter from Michael, dated 2 months ago. I've decided to fully finance Rachel's wedding. It's simpler this way. I'll coordinate directly with her. Hope you understand. There was no greeting, no discussion, just another decision made without me. My stomach dropped. He hadn't even told me, and Rachel hadn't either. They'd carved me out of yet another chapter, like I was a footnote. I sat on the couch, the letter crumpled in my hand. For a moment, the boxes around me blurred. This wasn't just about moving out. It was about everything I hadn't said, everything I'd swallowed, but I'd already started. The boxes were packed. The apartment was waiting. And I wouldn't let this letter pull me back into the silence. I folded the letter once, then again, and dropped it into the donation pile. I wouldn't carry it into my next life. But I couldn't help but wonder, how many more pieces of me had they decided didn't belong? I wasn't going to wait for permission anymore. The change was happening, with or without their approval. The key turned easier than I expected. It clicked, light and final, like the period at the end of a sentence I'd taken too long to write. My new apartment smelled like paint and dust and something sweet from the bakery across the street. The floors creaked like they were waking up too. I stood in the doorway, box in my arms, breath caught somewhere between panic and wonder. This was mine. The first thing I unpacked wasn't a mug or a plate. It was my old writing journal, the one I used to carry everywhere before Rachel was born. I placed it gently on the windowsill, beside a vase I filled with grocery store daisies. The room glowed in the late afternoon light, golden and unsure, just like me. The couch arrived next. Small, blue, secondhand. I threw an old quilt over it, the one I'd made before my wedding, back when I still believed in permanence. I set up a little writing nook near the balcony, laptop, coffee mug, and that typewriter I'd packed in the me box. The keys still clacked. My hands still remembered. I sat there, watching the street below. Couples walked by with gelato. A street musician played something soft on a guitar. And for a minute, I didn't feel lost. I felt ready. Then the phone buzzed. Rachel again. We need a decision. You're in the program. Don't make this difficult, Mom. I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. And I felt nothing. No rage, no sorrow. Just stillness. I put the phone face down and opened the laptop instead. I pulled up a blank document, titled it, The Life I Almost Forgot, and began to type. The words came like a storm held too long. Sentences about silence, about duty, about becoming a mother and losing the girl underneath. I wrote about Rachel's first steps and my last poem, about all the rooms I disappeared in. I didn't try to make it perfect. I just let it pour. By sunset, I had 5 pages. When I looked up, the city was beginning to twinkle. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the balcony, breathing in this new chapter like a foreign language I might just be fluent in. Later that night, I unwrapped a canvas I hadn't touched since 2006. The brushes were stiff, but they softened with water. I signed up for a local art class online. Wednesday mornings, just me and the paint. No one needed to approve. No one needed to understand. This was mine. I lit a candle and played Ella Fitzgerald softly in the background. I danced, just once, barefoot on the hardwood floor, arms stretched like I was casting off something old. In the quiet, I imagined my memoir sitting on a shelf one day. Maybe no one would read it, or maybe someone like me would find it and remember her own name. Then the screen lit up again, a new message. from a number I didn't recognize at first. "Hi, Grace, this is Mia from EventCo, just confirming your role in the processional and head count for the reception. Please respond by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Rachel's planner." I stared at it. "No, hello, Grace, are you okay?" "No, we're so glad you're coming." Just logistics, like I was a placeholder in a script I hadn't agreed to. I placed the phone on the writing desk and looked back at the open journal. I could still feel the music under my skin, the brush in my hand, my story unfolding in real time. I turned the phone screen over and walked back to the window, watching the city pulse below. I wouldn't be confirming anything tonight. Some silences weren't passive. They were power. Every step I took toward independence felt like a step away from Rachel, but I knew I had to choose myself. The paint on my hands had dried in tiny ridges. Smudges of ochre and cobalt stained my fingertips as I packed up my easel from Wednesday's class, a subtle badge of freedom I hadn't expected to feel so proud of. Outside, the early evening hummed with promise. Laughter from the cafe patio, the rhythmic clink of espresso cups, the sun casting long shadows across the cobblestone. That class had become my sanctuary, not just because I was finally painting again, but because it brought me Lily. She was tall, silver-haired, with a laugh like breaking glass and a wardrobe full of linen and unapologetic opinions. The first day she asked, "Are you painting to remember or to forget?" I had no answer. Now I did. We walked together after class, our bags slung over shoulders. "Italy," she said. 2 weeks in Tuscany. Art, wine, and no apologies. Come with me." I laughed instinctively. "That's ridiculous." She stopped walking. "So is wasting the rest of your life making polite excuses for people who don't see you?" I paused, heart fluttering. That night, I stood at my little writing desk, rereading my latest chapter. The words felt sturdier, less afraid, less apologetic. I sipped chamomile tea and imagined the vineyards, the sketchbook tucked under my arm, the wind warm on my face. And for once, I didn't immediately think of Rachel. I thought of me. But she hadn't disappeared entirely. The texts still came, spaced out like aftershocks. "I know you're hurt, but you're still my mom. Everyone's asking where you are. Please don't make this dramatic. Just be there. You always are." Each one hit differently, like someone knocking on a door I'd already locked. Not malicious, just entitled. Rachel didn't know how to exist without my yes, and I didn't know how to go back now that I'd found my no. I set the phone aside and opened a new email. Flight deals to Europe. I stared at the screen, then clicked open a tab Lily had sent. Tuscany Women's Art Retreat. Reimagine your life. I hovered over the registration form, my breath shallow. On my balcony, the city pulsed with weekend life. A couple laughed below. A dog barked. Someone played jazz on a radio, faint and old-fashioned. I leaned against the railing, letting the breeze comb through my hair. I missed Rachel. That ache would never vanish entirely, but the grief didn't own me anymore. I missed the version of her that still held my hand on walks, not the version that texted me like I was staff. A notification blinked. Reminder, final RSVP dial. Headline, Rachel's wedding weekend events. I closed it. Instead, I pulled out my sketchbook, drew the outline of a window overlooking a vineyard. My hand was steady, my mind clearer than it had been in years. I didn't know what Italy would bring, but I knew it wouldn't be another day sitting quietly at the edge of someone else's celebration, waiting for permission to feel whole. I clicked register for the retreat and began typing my passport number into the flight form. It was time, not to escape, but to expand. This time the journey was mine. I've never felt so alive, so free. Italy would be my chance to completely disconnect from the past. The suitcase clicked shut with a quiet finality, the zipper tracing over fabric like a sigh. I sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on its surface. It wasn't packed with many things, just a few linen dresses, sandals, my favorite journal, and 2 pens. But it held something heavier than clothes. It held intent. The apartment was dim in the early morning light, shadows stretching across the hardwood floors like reaching arms. I'd barely slept. Not from nerves, those had burned away, but from a kind of charged anticipation I hadn't felt since college, since before. I stood, rolled my shoulders, and walked to the window. Outside, the bakery was opening, the scent of rising bread curling through the air. Down the street, a dog barked. A man opened his cafe umbrella. The world was happening, and I was finally part of it again. Then the phone rang. Rachel. Her name glowed on the screen, a single syllable that had once defined my entire life. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. Her voice was soft, careful. Mom? I leaned against the window frame. I'm here. I heard you're leaving. For Italy. I waited. I could hear traffic on her end, a door closing, maybe her heels on pavement. Then she spoke again. I don't want this to be the last thing between us. Can we talk when you get back, before the wedding? My throat tightened. The request wasn't unreasonable, but the weight it carried was. I can't promise anything, I said carefully, but I'll listen. She was silent for a beat. Safe travels, she whispered. Then the line went dead. No manipulation, no guilt, just space. And that was enough. For now. At the airport, everything felt brighter. The tiles gleamed. Strangers smiled. The gate agents greeted me like I belonged. For once, I didn't feel like someone's mother or someone's mistake. I felt like a woman stepping into her own story. Tuscany greeted me like memory. Soft hills, clay rooftops, birds darting between sunbeams. The retreat center was a villa nestled between vineyards and olive trees, the air warm and honeyed. I unpacked in silence. A small room, a wide window, a bed dressed in white cotton. My fingers traced the ridges of my journal's spine before I placed it on the nightstand. Lily met me in the courtyard with a glass of wine. You made it, she said, not as a question, but as a welcome. The days bled into each other beautifully. Mornings filled with espresso and oil paint, afternoons writing in the garden, breeze lifting the pages. I wrote freely, about joy, about fury, about erasure. My voice spilled out in paragraphs that didn't ask for permission. Each woman at the retreat brought her story. One had lost a child, one had left a marriage after 40 years, one had come out at 70, and here we were, gathered in freedom, sipping Chianti under the stars. On the 6th day, I sat outside a sun-drenched cafe in Siena, sketching the Duomo. A couple passed holding hands, a toddler chased pigeons, and I realized I wasn't sad. I wasn't aiding. I was here. My phone buzzed. An email. Grace, just confirming you will not be attending. Michael has RSVP'd solo. Rachel wants no empty seats. Thank you for the clarity. Mia, event coordinator. I stared at the screen. Not mom, not we miss you, just logistics, a transaction. My fingers hovered, but I didn't reply. Instead, I flipped to a fresh page in my journal and wrote one sentence. She will have her day, and I will have my life. I closed the email and turned back to the view. Vineyards glowing in the golden light. I lifted my glass, not in mourning, but in gratitude. I had finally arrived. I thought I was past the heartbreak, but Rachel's message cracked open a wound I thought was healed. By mid-morning, the villa was buzzing with chatter. Women comparing sketch techniques, fresh fruit in the courtyard, olive branches dancing in sunlight. I'd slipped into a peaceful rhythm. Espresso in the morning, writing by noon, wine and laughter in the evenings. I was beginning to feel whole again. But then my phone buzzed by the pool. I frowned. This was the second day in a row I'd silenced notifications. The upstairs room had poor reception. This was new. I dripped water from my towel onto the tiled patio and hit view call. It was his name, Michael. I hadn't heard from him since I left. My heart stuttered. I considered ignoring the call but pressed accept. A cracked line in his voice, soft and urgent, floated through. Grace? Hope I'm not disturbing you. I offered a small breath, leaned against the pool chair, towel drooping. What's wrong? He hesitated. It's Rachel and the wedding. It's unraveling without you." My fingertips clenched on the towel. "What do you mean?" There was a pause, fuller than any silence between us. He cleared his throat. "Samantha, Rachel's planner, is overwhelmed. The florist quit. The caterer oversold. Guests are texting about refunds. Rachel, she's falling apart." I closed my eyes, picturing her prepared announcement morphing into chaos, but more than that, I felt numb. "I'm sorry, Grace. I know you don't want to go, but they're desperate, and I thought you might at least know." Blood rushed in my ears. Knowing was not saying yes. "Michael," I said slowly, "this wedding is her life now. Or what she thinks it is. If it falls apart, that's on her." He sighed. "I was hoping you could intervene. She needs you." Now dawned. Needing me. On her terms, at her expense. "I'm not there," I said. "I can't be her safety net anymore." He pitied me through the line. "I know this has been hard. Your absence, I always respected your choice. But this is more than pride now." "Makes two of us." I forced a laugh, bitter and hollow. "She didn't want me there. So that's on her too." Michael was quiet again, a sigh that bent across miles. "I understand. I wanted her to know you could have helped." I swallowed. A hard brick in my throat. She knew and chose not to. His voice dropped, almost loving. "I always respected you, Grace. I know what you gave up." The words tapped at something beneath the surface, an admission too late for the wounds, but heavy with relief. "Thank you," I said, surprisingly steady, "for saying it." He cleared his voice. "I won't call you again about this. I hope you find peace." "I have," I answered, though a faint ache lingered. He hesitated as though weighing more to say, "I'm proud of you." That changed something, not enough to me, but enough to close a door firmly. "Thank you," I repeated. I ended the call and stared at the screen. Call ended. No echo or afterthought. Around me, the laughter resumed. My pen rested on a notebook page beside me. The ink dried in a half-formed chapter. I placed a hand on the leather cover, smoothing the pressed title, "The Life I Almost Forgot." I lifted my gaze to the villa's terrace, vines draped overhead, sunlight warm on my bare feet. This was deeper than Italy's beauty. It was my reclamation. I slipped my phone into my bag and reached for the notebook, then paused. This journey had begun as escape, but had become transformation. I dated the page, wrote a single line. He said he was proud. I believe him. I closed the book and rose. A breeze rolled in, and I stepped into the courtyard, letting the midday sun settle on my face. Behind me, the women in watercolor-filled gowns greeted me with smiles. I returned one, quiet and whole. Then, under my breath, "Not for them, but for me." I lifted my chin and walked into the warmth of my new life. Rachel's absence was her choice, but my presence in my own story was mine. I didn't expect closure, but sometimes it comes in ways you don't anticipate. The late afternoon light draped across the villa's courtyard as I settled into my favorite wicker chair. My journal was open on my lap, pages filled with reflections, hope, and hard-won truths. Italy had been more than a retreat. It had been a reckoning. Over the past days, I'd spent hours writing beneath olive trees, letting my pen wander beyond the ache of being excluded. I discovered solace in every sunrise, joy in small rituals, like sipping cardamom espresso or wandering through Grève's market stalls, fingertips brushing jars of honey and handmade ceramics. That morning, while wandering a hilltop chapel, I realized I didn't feel the tug of Rachel's wedding anymore. Not fear, not longing, just a gentle acceptance. My home wasn't tied to one family's timeline. It was wherever I dared to build it. My phone buzzed, and I nearly ignored it. But something told me to check. It was Rachel. "Mom, can we meet when you're back? I want to talk." The words were simple. Not polite fluff, not demands, just a request. My chest tightened, memory rising, the sting of her earlier texts, but beneath it all, a flicker of hope. I waited until evening to reply. I chose, yes, let's meet after I return. No apology, no promise, just a boundary, just a possibility. That night, under a sky still warm from the day, I wrote in my journal, "Closure doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what to carry with grace." I paused, the pen hovering over the page. Italy had taught me that departure wasn't abandonment. It could be preparation for a different kind of return. In the following days, I finished a chapter reflecting on being a mother and reclaiming myself, not as a sacrifice, but as a choice. I shared it with Lily, who responded with, "I knew you'd come back to you." That felt like a blessing bigger than any reconciliation. On my last evening, the retreat organized a farewell dinner under lantern-lit vines. We tipped glasses to new chapters, to courage, to reinvention. I caught my reflection in a lantern's glass, older, yes, but luminous. The night before departure, I walked the villa's stone path alone, heels clicking softly. Shadows wrapped around the walls, whispers of cicadas in the dark. I exhaled deep, tasting freedom. Back in my room, I closed the journal and tucked it beside the typewriter. I packed a final box labeled Italy, filled with sketches of vineyards, pressed lavender, letters I'd written to myself. This time, the pages weren't brittle with heartbreak, but alive with possibility. The morning I checked out, the sky was pale and forgiving. I carried my luggage down the stairs with quiet gratitude. It was my final goodbye to the villa and a hello to what came next on the plane. I turned pages in my notebook, making notes on how to prepare, what to say, what not to say, where to meet Rachel. I sketched a loose plan. Coffee shop, midday, no expectations, just presence. When the flight path dipped toward home, I felt a steady calm. My hands didn't tremble, my heart didn't race. I thought of the woman who'd slammed that chipped mug onto the counter months ago, ashes behind her feet. I'd come far. Walking through my front door that evening, I paused. No voice demanding resignation, no silence weighing on me, just quiet space. I unpacked the Italy box and placed the sketches on my desk. The lavender pressed between pages filled the room. Then I dialed Rachel. Her voice was tentative when she answered. "Hi, Mom." I smiled, though she couldn't see me. "Hi, sweetheart." My tone held no blame, only invitation. There was a pause, then, I'm sorry. I waited, aware that this moment could tip either way, toward healing or final farewell. I wasn't closing the door, but I wasn't stepping forward blindly. "I want to talk," I said, simple and steady. "Can we meet tomorrow?" she whispered. I nodded, though alone. "I'd like that." I hung up and stood in the empty room, feeling both the gravity and the grace of this moment. I'd come for closure, but I realized maybe this was the first step toward something new. This conversation would decide whether there was any going back or if we would forever be strangers. The cafe smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon. Mid-morning sunlight streamed through large windows, casting geometric patterns on the wooden floor. I sat at a corner table, calm but alert, stirring tea with care. My journal lay. "I was building a version of my life that didn't include pain," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "But I didn't realize it would cost me you. I'm so sorry." I breathed in. "Thank you for saying that." My voice trembled, but I guided it steady. "I needed time to remember who I am outside of being your mom. The wedding exclusion, it hurt." She leaned forward. "I thought I was protecting us from drama. But I know now I silenced you, and it silenced a part of me too." The air shimmered with raw honesty. I sipped tea, grounding myself in the calm. "I'm proud of you for saying that," I told her, "but I can't just pick up where we left off." Her face dropped, and I felt the sting of the tension returning. "I understand," I continued, "but I also won't attend the wedding." Her eyes filled. "I get it. I'm still hoping one day you might change your mind, but I respect your choice." I leaned back, calm, resolute. I need to live in a place where my voice matters, even if it changes expectations. We paused again, letting tears form at the edges of conversation. She reached across the table, hesitantly touching my hand. "I want that for you." I looked at her, older now in a way I hadn't allowed myself to see before. The child who once demanded affection had grown into someone who fought to survive her own fear. I nodded gently. "I want that for me, too. And for us. Maybe one day in a new way." She sniffed, steadying herself. "I'd like that." Our conversation drifted then, softening. We spoke of neutral things, her art studies, my writing plans, the retreat in Italy. For the first time in months, it felt like two people meeting each other, not old wounds. I asked her about the wedding. "What do you want from it?" She looked away, voice small. "I want my mom there, but I realize it's not just about me." I offered a small smile. "We're not the same as we were." It's okay." She leaned forward, hopeful yet humble. "I hope this isn't the end." I considered it. Tears welled again, not from pain, but from grief and hope twisting together. I squeezed her hand lightly. "It's not the end, just different." We lingered over warm drinks, the cafe's buzz a soft backdrop. When our cups were empty, I closed my notebook and reached across, folding it gently and sliding it into her hands. "Maybe start here, or whenever you're ready." She opened it, thumb brushing pages full of reflection and resilience. Her eyes softened. We both sat there, letting the space between us reshape, not fitting back into old roles, but learning new ones. Finally, I stood. She rose too. We embraced, short but suffused with the weight of what we'd survived and what we were still building. Outside, sunlight hit the pavement with an inviting warmth. I walked away feeling calm, resolute, neither tension nor tears, but clarity. I wasn't walking into old life, nor shutting a door entirely. I was stepping forward on my own path. I left the cafe breathing in quiet promise. Our story wasn't over, but it would never be the same. I never thought I'd hear these words, "We want you at the wedding," but I was ready to decide for myself. The following Saturday dawned cool and clear. I was sipping Earl Grey at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed. A banner notification. "Rachel, 11:03 a.m. My heart stiffened. "Mom, the wedding's in 2 weeks. We'd like you to walk down the aisle with me. I mean it. Would you?" I stared at the screen. The words were simple yet seismic. After months of silence, distance, and growth, she was inviting me. Not as a perfunctory gesture, but as someone she wanted there in the light. I felt the old tug, the motherly instinct to say yes, to step back in, to fix everything. But something else stirred beneath it, my hard-won sense of self. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I tucked the phone away and closed my eyes. Outside, sparrows twittered. I breathed in, calm. I'd come far enough to know this decision mattered. Closed beside me, words still fresh in my heart. Rachel arrived, hesitant. Her shoulders tensed when she saw me, and her greeting was quiet. "Hi, Mom." I gestured at the seat across from me. "Hi, sweetheart." We sat, tea and coffee warming between us. The initial silence stretched before Rachel cleared her throat. "I've been turning this over in my head," she began softly. "How I handled everything. The texts, excluding you. I was wrong." Her apology had weight, not flimsy or rehearsed, but real, and it hit me with a mix of relief and ache. I nodded, letting the space hold us. 2 days later, I met Miriam for coffee on a quiet patio bathed in morning light. I wore the dress I'd chosen before leaving, soft gray, simple and unassuming, but it fit me now, instead of fitting expectations. Miriam sipped her latte, regard warm. "So?" I laid Rachel's message on the table, folded and fragile. "She wants me there, not just present, honored." My voice trembled with truth. Miriam's eyes softened. "How do you feel?" I exhaled. Proud, surprised, even hopeful, but also cautious. I worked hard to build a life that's not defined by anyone else. I paused. I don't want to walk in just to appease her. If I do it, it must feel right. For me. She nodded slowly. That's the only reason to go. For you. We talked about boundaries, ceremony roles, how to greet her new family without losing myself again. I scribbled notes, reminders. Sit with confidence. Speak up once. Leave if it breaks peace. Later that afternoon, I typed a reply. Rachel, I'd be honored to walk with you, but on my terms, I'll be there as me. No need for speeches, no staying late. Let's talk details. I hesitated a moment before hitting send. Then I felt light. My voice had entered the room again. The next days passed in a calm hum. I painted in the evening, fueled by lily white coffee during the day. I sketched floral arrangements I liked, not as suggestions, but for myself, something I would enjoy wearing in my hair. I chose a new scarf for the wedding, deep teal velvet, hand-dyed. It spoke of change and rootedness. I took it to the tailor to clip away threads and hem it for a shawl. The tailor's quiet praise, very you, felt like the first true compliment in months. I called Michael to share the news. His voice brightened. I'm glad, Grace. That's good. I felt a ripple of uncertainty. Did that mean I had to mend every broken relationship? I reminded myself, peace, not perfection. By the morning of the wedding, everything was ready. My suitcase held one simple dress, the teal shawl, my journal, and a small wrapped notebook, a gift for Rachel. In it was a single note, for the new chapters we create. The drive to the venue was quiet, scenic roads lined with birch, the sun low and forgiving. I felt neither nervous nor jubilant, just steady. I wasn't stepping back into who I was. I was stepping forward into who I'd become. I parked beneath an arch of flowering vines and gathered my things. No rush, no anxiety, just purposeful calm. I paused before entering the wedding house, hand on the door. Beyond, voices, laughter, the low chords of a violist tuning. I squared my shoulders and stepped inside. I walked forward, not into old shadows, but toward my own light, and I felt ready for whatever came next. The wedding day arrived, and I didn't feel like a spectator. I felt like an equal. Soft morning light filtered over the folding chairs, the altar draped in white shears and olive branches. My heart beat steady, not with nerves, but with quiet purpose. I smoothed the teal shawl at my shoulders, scarf now symbol, not accessory, and inhaled. Today unfolded on my terms. Closed beside me, words still fresh in my heart. Rachel arrived, hesitant. Her shoulders tensed when she saw me, and her greeting was quiet. Hi, Mom. I gestured at the seat across from me. Hi, sweetheart. We sat, tea and coffee warming between us. The initial silence stretched before Rachel cleared her throat. I've been turning this over in my head, she began softly. How I handled everything. The texts, excluding you. I was wrong. Her apology had weight, not flimsy or rehearsed, but real, and it hit me with a mix of relief and ache. I nodded, letting the space hold us. 2 days later, I met Miriam for coffee on a quiet patio bathed in morning light. I wore the dress I'd chosen before leaving, soft gray, simple and unassuming, but it fit me now, instead of fitting expectations. Miriam sipped her latte, regard warm. So? I laid Rachel's message on the table, folded and fragile. She wants me there, not just present, honored. My voice trembled with truth. Miriam's eyes softened. How do you feel? I exhaled. Proud, surprised, even hopeful, but also cautious. I worked hard to build a life that's not defined by anyone else. I paused. I don't want to walk in just to appease her. If I do it, it must feel right. For me. She nodded slowly. That's the only reason to go. For you. We talked about boundaries, ceremony roles, how to greet her new family without losing myself again. I scribbled notes, reminders. Sit with confidence. Speak up once. Leave if it breaks peace. Later that afternoon, I typed a reply. Rachel, I'd be honored to walk with you, but on my terms, I'll be there as me. No need for speeches, no staying late. Let's talk details. I hesitated a moment before hitting send. Then I felt light. My voice had entered the room again. The next days passed in a calm hum. I painted in the evening, fueled by lily white coffee during the day. I sketched floral arrangements I liked, not as suggestions, but for myself, something I would enjoy wearing in my hair. I chose a new scarf for the wedding, deep teal velvet, hand-dyed. It spoke of change and rootedness. I took it to the tailor to clip away threads and hem it for a shawl. The tailor's quiet praise, "Very you," felt like the first true compliment in months. I called Michael to share the news. His voice brightened. "I'm glad, Grace. That's good." I felt a ripple of uncertainty. Did that mean I had to mend every broken relationship? I reminded myself, peace, not perfection. By the morning of the wedding, everything was ready. My suitcase held one simple dress, the teal shawl, my journal, and a small wrapped notebook, a gift for Rachel. In it was a single note, "For the new chapters we create." The drive to the venue was quiet, scenic roads lined with birch, the sun low and forgiving. I felt neither nervous nor jubilant, just steady. I wasn't stepping back into who I was. I was stepping forward into who I'd become. I parked beneath an arch of flowering vines and gathered my things. No rush, no anxiety, just purposeful calm. I paused before entering the wedding house, hand on the door. Beyond, voices, laughter, the low chords of a violist tuning. I squared my shoulders and stepped inside. I walked forward, not into old shadows, but toward my own light, and I felt ready for whatever came next. The wedding day arrived, and I didn't feel like a spectator. I felt like an equal. Soft morning light filtered over the folding chairs, the altar draped in white shears and olive branches. My heart beat steady, not with nerves, but with quiet purpose. I smoothed the teal shawl at my shoulders, scarf now symbol, not accessory, and inhaled. Today unfolded on my terms.
I was working on a feature about reinventing midlife, combining anecdotes from Italy, arts classes, and quiet moments of clarity. Each keystroke felt deliberate, mine. The joys and uncertainties of my past year wove together in sentences that both healed and ignited me. A message flashed on my screen. "Rachel, how about breakfast this Sunday to celebrate you and us?" It felt like a lifeline thrown across a river I'd learned to cross alone. My chest fluttered, not with expectation, but warmth. I typed back, "I'd love that." Later, I met Lily for an exhibition opening at the local gallery. The space buzzed with vibrant energy, photographs, sculptures, paintings. We marveled at a piece of swirling cobalt waves. Lily squeezed my hand. "Look how far you've come." I looked at my reflection in the glass, smudged paint on my fingers, a contented curve to my smile, and realized I had, back home, I rediscovered my passport tucked into a drawer. Prague, Kyoto, Amalfi, names scribbled beside drawings of maps. I traced each one, feeling an itch of curiosity unfurl in my bones. That evening, Michael called, his voice soft and proud. We chatted about Rachel's progress and my feature piece. It was still tender, but solid. He told me he'd always admired my courage. No guilt. No regrets. Weeks turned into routines, morning writing, afternoons teaching a community workshop on narrative expression, evenings curled with Nora over wine and conversation. I accepted the pencraft position, my first paid steady gig. The email invite slid into my inbox like a declaration, "Welcome to the team." One Saturday, as blossoms bloomed in the park, Rachel and I walked side by side. Our words were gentle, catching up, retrieving trust, laughing about small things. At a bench, she turned to me. "You're glowing." I smiled. She reached into her bag. "For you," she said, handing me a framed photo, a snapshot from The wedding, us, arm in arm, genuine smiles. A recognition of the distance traveled, together yet apart. Inside, I felt something settle. Months later, I strolled that same park alone. Sunlight filtered through leaves, birds darted overhead, children chased in the distance. My notebook was in my pocket, containing ideas for essays, travel notes, new freelance angles. I inhaled deeply, my lungs opening to the possibilities that I paused beside a pond, watching ripples expand outward from a tossed pebble. That ripple was me, starting small, deliberate, intentional, and watching where it led. That I pulled out the notebook and jotted a sentence: freedom isn't leaving, it's choosing. I paused and closed it. Ahead, a path curved into future unknowns. I walked forward, steady and sure. Each step echoed my own voice. I was free, finally, truly free, and this was only the beginning. I never thought my life could be mine again. But now, it's all mine. Morning light poured through the living room windows, warming the tea I cradled as I paused before my desk. Sunlight danced across scattered drafts, memoir ideas, travel outlines, character sketches. My gaze traveled over each one, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. This wasn't chaos, it was creation. And it was mine. That I opened the latest chapter of my memoir. The words flowed, shaped by a year of reclaiming space in my own story. Every paragraph glowed with honesty, about the guilt, the departures, the birth of a self I'd nearly forgotten. I typed the title, My Life, My Terms, and pressed save. The screen shimmered like a promise. That a ping announced a calendar event: call with Pencraft editor, feedback on first draft. My pulse fluttered with anticipation. No anxiety, just clarity. I breathed in, exhaled, and clicked to join. His praise, a gentle but solid foundation, unsettled something warm in my chest. Pride. Later, I slipped into my coat and walked toward the cafe where Rachel and I had begun rebuilding. Along the way, I passed the gallery where Lily and I first met, her studio window flickering with paint and possibility. Outside, a sign announced, Saturday Art Writing Workshop, join us. I tucked the flyer into my pocket, a silent vow to keep building, when Rachel slid onto a bench beside me in the park later that afternoon. The air was crisp with early autumn promise. We sipped warm cider and watched leaves drift. Her voice was even, open. Your memoir. I read your chapter. It's beautiful, Mom. She paused. It helped me understand. I blinked. This time, not hurt or surprise, but gratitude. Thank you, I murmured. Our conversation turned to lighter things, her new job, my travel itinerary, but always circled back to what we were building now, connection threaded with respect. We weren't lost in expectations or past hurts. We were moving forward. On the walk home, I stopped at an art store. Inside, shelves held paints, canvases, brushes strewn like untold adventures. I picked up a medium-quality sketch pad and a set of charcoal pencils. The familiar weight in my hand felt like an extension of my pulse, and my promise to myself. Back home, I set the package on my desk beside the laptop and slipped the sketchbook into my bag. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll sketch that oak-lined path behind the park. Tomorrow, I'll keep choosing me. That evening, Michael texted, so proud of you. When does your book come out? The words read like sunlight on quiet water. I replied, sooner than you think. Days turned into weeks, manuscript edits, freelance pieces, sketches of Italy's vineyards and my own backyard oak, laughter with Nora over wine, and lingering dinners with old and new friends. I found joy in routine, forging agreements with myself that my life didn't revolve around roles I'd outgrown. One Saturday, a letter arrived, an acceptance from a small publisher interested in my memoir concept. I placed the envelope gently next to the framed wedding photo from Rachel, us walking arm in arm. 2 stories woven but independent. Side by side. The next morning, I walked through the park, the first leaves ruffling underfoot. Birds flitted overhead. Children's voices threaded through the air. My notebook lay open in my coat pocket, blank pages waiting. That I paused beside the pond, its surface calm, reflecting golden leaves and autumn sky. I pulled out my pen and wrote, Here, I choose freedom. Here, I choose myself. Here, my story continues, the pen hovered. A breeze rustled through the trees. This moment, was not an ending, but the start of everything I'd meant to live. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, dinner tomorrow? I want to take you somewhere special. I read it, nodded with quiet delight, not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. I closed the notebook and slipped it into my pocket. I inhaled deep, filling my lungs with possibility and peace. Ahead, the path gently curved toward the unknown. And this time, I would walk it, on my terms. I took a step forward, shoulders squared, heart open, ready for whatever awaited on the other side.